Good afternoon, everyone. It's 1:03, and we're going to call the July 14th, 2021 Planning Advisory Committee meeting to order. In council chambers, as per the COVID protocols, there's only myself as chair and Deputy Clerk Recording Secretary Joel Watts. The committee and the public and applicants and staff are all joining us by Zoom. Committee members present with us today by Zoom is Mayor Letham, Deputy Mayor O'Reilly, Councillor Seymour Fagan, Mike Barkwell, Wayne Brumwell, and Jason Willick. So at this point, if I could have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Mayor Letham, seconded by Deputy Mayor O'Reilly. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Go ahead, Mike.
Yes, I have a pecuniary interest in 3.3.2 for the 205 Francis Street, as I represented the owner previously when he had the property listed. And I have encouraged him to do a rezoning to be able to have more clients, more tenants, different tenants.
Thanks, Mike. Councillor Seymour Fagan.
Hi, as you know, I'm counselor for Bobcaygeon and can mount in many different areas, but I also have a business in Bobcaygeon. So this is in regards to the Harper application for a luncheonette in Bobcaygeon. So I just wanted to let everyone know I do own a restaurant. I'm impartial to whether this goes in or not. But yeah, so just so everyone knows.
So are you declaring a pecuniary interest then Councillor Seymour Fagan?
I don't know. I don't know if I have to. I'm not receiving any funds from it, so I don't know. Is there any direction, Joel, maybe on this?
It's up to you to decide. You are the ultimate responsibility. If you were to ask for advice before the meeting, you could consult with the Integrity Commissioner.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm fine. So because I don't care either way which way this goes, so it doesn't affect my business. So yeah, so I'm not going to declare it, but I just want everyone to know.
Okay. All right, so that brings us down to Section 3, public meetings. So as required under the Planning Act, a public meeting is being held prior to the committee making a recommendation on these applications. The purpose of this public hearing is to allow the committee to gather information on the applications before us, to hear those wishing to make oral submissions on applications, and to allow the committee to ask questions of the applicants, interested parties, and staff. Everyone who makes a presentation at this meeting is requested to provide their name for the public record. In the interest of time, the committee respectfully asks that you keep your presentation to no more than 5 minutes. When called, please turn on your video and turn off your mute and state your name. So we're going to start with 3.1, Plan 2021-038, Official Plan Amendment and Zoning Bylaw Amendment for Hamilton Street, Lindsay. Jonathan?
Good afternoon, Planning Advisory Committee. I am John DeWars, and I am here to present proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for 25, or what will be soon to be known as 25 Hamilton Street here in Lindsay. And I'm just going to share my screen. Alrighty. So here we have the land identified as 25 Hamilton Street. Currently, it is a park space, zoned parks and open space under the Town of Lindsay zoning bylaw, also designated the same under the Lindsay official plan. It currently contains 2 soccer nets and is used as a park space. We have, the city has received an application from Kevin Duque Consulting, who is also in attendance today to answer any questions further on. We received an application to amend the Lindsay official plan and Town of Lindsay zoning bylaw to residential zoning to permit a 46 unit, 4-story plus penthouse, multi-unit development. This would be considered an affordable housing project and is being operated or would be operated under the Kawartha Lakes Halliburton Housing Corporation, an arm of the city of Kawartha Lakes. Here we have the site plan here for the proposed amendment. So as a breakdown, there would be currently under the current design, there would be approximately 20 one-bedroom suites, 11 two-bedroom suites, and 8 three-bedroom suites with 7 barrier-free. To the north of the site, we have more residential uses. To the east is commercial employment lands. To the south, we have an unopened road allowance with residential unit further south. And to the west is a residential and commercial zones. With this application, the staff received a planning justification report, a geotechnical investigation report, a functional servicing report, a traffic impact study, as well as corresponding drawings for servicing and design. Staff have circulated those documents for review and are awaiting comments to finalize comments on the planning justification report insofar as the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. From a policy perspective, generally at a high level, the proposed amendment does satisfy and meet many principles within the provincial policy statement, namely that this proposed development is within an established settlement area and can be serviced using existing municipal servicing and infrastructure. There are no proposed increases to pipes in the ground. Everything can be adequately serviced, and there would be no traffic impacts from this either. From the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, many of those sentiments are duplicated through that as well, that this is within an established settlement area and can be adequately serviced. Additionally, this site is along the I believe it's the Lindsay Green Line, Lindsay Transit Red Line. There is a stop just to the north at, I believe it is 15 Hamilton Street, where this particular land is walking distance to that stop. So this can also be considered transit supportive. With regards to the Lindsay official plan, so the proposed amendment would apply a residential designation to facilitate the proposed development, as it is currently parks and open space. When reviewing the application, staff gave strong consideration to the removal of this particular park. The Lindsay official plan has guidelines and direction for park spaces within the city, and it states that it states a minimum size, which is 1.8 hectares for a neighborhood park. This particular park is more so a parkette, as it is 0.88 hectares, so it's quite a bit smaller. Further to that, the Lindsay official plan also gives prescribes a catchment area for green spaces that folks in the town should be able to walk to. Based on a mapping exercise or evaluation, there are other parks in the area that can adequately meet that 800-meter catchment area, both to the east and west of the specific site. Through the zoning bylaw, the proposed amendment would be to a residential multiple 2 exception zone. So that'd be a medium density residential zone to accommodate the use. The exception zone would be applied to accommodate the minimum lot frontage. So right now, the lot is deficient in frontage, and instead of going through a minor variance, this particular application would just have that acknowledged through the exception zone. Secondly, the parking requirement. So under current parking requirements, 62 spaces are required under the RM2 zoning. Proposed with this development are 28 spaces. That is something that staff are currently evaluating the merit of that particular reduction, as it is fairly substantial. This notice of this proposed amendment was displayed on site, as well as circulated to residents within 120-meter radius. As a result, 3 phone calls were received from residents and 1 email. All correspondence, the questions asked were very similar. They pertained to ownership of the property and who would be maintaining it. Through consultation with the applicant, I was able to determine that this would be a city-maintained property, landscaping, grass cutting, snow removal, that sort of thing. So the city would be maintaining that. Second question pertained to the affordability of this site and the tenants that would be residing here. So I was, through the consultant again, I was informed that this unit or this development would provide a range of affordability and a range of sizes and units to accommodate various individuals. Lastly, this was previously touched on, the removal of the park space. So a couple residents did indicate concern with the removal of the green space as it is used. Through this, I provided description on the Lindsay official plan direction on park spaces, and will be evaluating through conversations with community services the proposed multi-use pathway on this that you can see on the south of the site, and potentially extending that further across to connect the green spaces that are to the east and the west of the proposed site. From a high level, staff can generally see merit in the proposed development. However, we still have to fine tune the zoning, proposed zoning amendments that would permit this development. And I do note that the consultant and the project team is here to answer further questions specific to the project. And I will take questions at this time.
Thanks, Jonathan. Committee, any questions of Jonathan on this application? Councillor Seymour Fagan.
Yes, I'm just wondering, is this part of the Housing First project as well, like 68 Lindsay Street, or is it separate? Or will there be Housing First units in with these other mixed units?
Through the chair to Councillor Seymour Fagan, I would defer that to the applicant.
Okay, any other questions of staff? Wayne?
What is the rationale behind the reduction in parking spaces?
Parking spaces?
Yes.
Yes, through the chair to member Bromwell. That parking space analysis, I had a conversation yesterday with the new, one of the new CEOs of the Kawartha Lakes Halliburton Housing Corporation, and am going to be provided analysis or a background on the rationale for that reduction in parking spaces. So that is something we are currently waiting on.
Thank you.
Councillor Seymour Fagan?
Have we done this in the past, sell our parkland for housing, private or public housing?
Through the chair to Councillor Seymour Fagan, I will look to potentially the acting director to address that one, as I personally am not aware of that in recent history. Mind you, I've only been here for a little over a year.
Thank you.
So through the chair to the councillor, I'm not aware of a situation either where we have done that. Having said that, we feel, our community services department feels that the land is surplus. So from that perspective, they don't feel a need for it. So from that perspective, it's being offered as a housing site to our housing group.
Okay, thank you. So I just have a question on that then. So it doesn't have to go through the process that all our other lands have gone through, where it has to go to the public. If the public would like to develop it, it can just go directly to our housing?
I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't necessarily deal with that, but I would suspect if it's going to another public entity, then it doesn't necessarily have to go through that procurement process.
Okay, thank you.
Disposition process, sorry.
Thank you.
Any further questions of Jonathan? Okay, seeing none, does the applicant owner or the agent on behalf of the applicant owner wish to speak to the application?
Yes, I would, Chairman Veal. I assume committee members, staff can hear me, yes? Great, thank you. I should also say it's kind of an exciting day. This has nothing to do with planning, but it's an exciting day for my family because my youngest daughter, who's also a planner who works for me, just gave birth to our 4th grandchild this morning. So it's a happy time here at our household. So that makes me old because that's 4 grandchildren. And Mr. Wilcox, I don't want any comments about my age, please. I am the planning consultant for the development proponent. I was retained by Tim Welsh Consulting, who's has been retained by the Housing Corporation to provide their services insofar as the realization of a proposed 46-unit affordable housing project within the town of Lindsay. I have spent considerable time working with the development team and staff to date to get to this public meeting. This is a municipal priority, not only in your community, but all communities across Ontario. That is affordability. To the question from Councillor Seymour Fagan, insofar as disposal of municipal parkland, I have been assured, as Mr. Hawley has indicated, that the subject lands have been deemed to be surplus to the over parkland structure within the town of Lindsay. And typically in those matters, then municipalities look to themselves first, say, can we use that land for some other productive purpose? And then then it goes to agencies. If not, then it becomes available to the public. So what we are contemplating then is the development of a greenfield site, if I can use that term, for a productive and necessary affordable housing project within the serviceable limits of your urban settlement area, that is the town of Lindsay. There was a question raised as well, if I may, Committee Member Bromwell about the reduction of site parking for affordable housing projects. Mr. Chairman, I have been involved in my professional capacity as a planning consultant and previously as the City of Peterborough's planner, and have been involved with, I think, as many as 30 affordable housing projects. And many of the affordable housing projects we deal with, the site parking requirement often starts at 0 because the persons residing there don't have enough money barely to pay rent. They will not have enough money to purchase and own a vehicle. But what we are contemplating is an appropriate level of site parking that would accommodate guests, visitors, staff, or others who may be at the site. But this is not a project where we're dealing persons who have enough income to be able to afford private ownership. And as Jonathan, your planners recognize, this will be a property adjacent to public transit, adjacent to public walkways, and adjacent to a range of community services. Now, the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment application were filed on March 25th, 2021 with the planning department. We have had, subsequent to the filing, a very meaningful public open house. We circulated notices of the project and held a virtual information meeting. I think there's about 7 area residents. I can describe the outcome of that meeting as being very favorable. Persons were asking questions like, how can I go from our project to that project in the event there's a social event? There were some queries about operation and management, and we assure the participants that this will be a project managed by the Kawartha Lakes Halliburton Housing Corporation, in essence, an arm of the city. So I would describe the public consultation leading to this meeting as very favorable. And I'm not aware, other than what your planner has described as the phone inquiries, that there's any public member attending today's meeting. There may be, I'm not certain. The application, the official plan amendment, seeks to change the property's designation from open space to residential. A zoning would be going to a multiple residential to permit a 46-unit, 4-story building with mechanical penthouse. We have to tweak the zoning to acknowledge a deficient lot frontage, but that's just a reality. That's the width of the property at the street, and to recognize the proposed parking supply. I might also advise planning committee that we have filed our site plan application on July 6th with the planning department. There is a real urgency to have this project proceed in a timely manner, because there are funding obligations and funding sources available to this project that if the project is delayed, then those may or may not be at peril. We are asking, therefore, and I've note that the municipal staff have conducted a high-level overview of provincial planning policies, official planning, etc. But as a professional planning consultant, I conducted an in-depth and impartial analysis of all those policies. This is a good planning project. It represents good planning. It meets the provincial policy. It's consistent with the PPS. It conforms to the growth plan. It implements your official plan. It delivers necessary affordable housing. So we're asking, therefore, Mr. Chairman, committee members, that the implementation report and appropriate implementing bylaws be prepared for consideration at the next available either PAC or council meeting. Again, there is a timeliness issue with this project, and it would be regrettable if there were delays incurred. We seem not to have any public concerns, and at this point, we have had considerable consultation with your departments and agencies, and arising from that to date, really nothing of a substantive nature has been provided. Now, as part of this call, joining me is your new CAO for your housing corporation, Kirsten Maxwell, who I've had opportunity to meet with and review this file, the housing consultant, and our project architect and engineer, in case you have questions that are beyond my ability or professional scope to speak to. So we've reviewed the report. Our preference would be that the implementing bylaws and the corresponding report be prepared by staff for your planning advisory committee meeting, perhaps in early August. If not, I believe there's an August 10th or 11th council meeting for adoption and approval. And I am, of course, available to respond to any questions of planning committee. Thank you again for hearing me out.
Thank you, Mr. Duguay, and congratulations on the arrival of your next or your latest grandchild. Committee,
another planner in the making.
Committee, any questions of the applicant, Deputy Mayor O'Reilly?
Thanks very much. It's you, Mr. Chair, to Kevin. Just a quick question. I had a resident across the road that made an inquiry about they were concerned about with a housing project going on across the road was perhaps the devaluation of their property. And like, I don't think they want to publicly state that anyways, or because they're certainly not against housing. But in your experience in Peterborough and other projects, have you ever found that to be true?
Mr. Chairman, to Deputy Mayor O'Reilly, no. I have not found that housing projects of this kind, well, first of all, its design and approach, unless we were to tell you it was affordable, you likely wouldn't know. It's very indicative of a very modern infill apartment site. So unless we were to tell you that it's affordable from the outside appearance, you would not know. It's my professional opinion, sir, that there would be no devaluation of property arising from the approval of this proposed housing project.
Thanks for that, Kevin. And did you I'll be asking staff around what the time frame moving forward with this application will be. Do you have any time frame about talking to the new CAO? What the urgency is? It money months away or weeks away, or what's your best information on that, Kevin?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, to Deputy Mayor O'Reilly. I can't speak to the intricacies of the schedule, but the concern of the development group and your new CAO being that there is really no timeline attached to the staff recommendation. So we were asking that it could proceed to the August meeting, because it's my understanding, sir, that there are obligations by the corporation to deliver a land use approvals, site plan approvals, and start construction by dates. And our concern is if this is pushed back until, say, an August or September meeting, then your bylaws aren't ratified to October, we may be jeopardizing the available funding. That is my understanding. Perhaps Kirsten Maxwell, who is part of this call, she may be able to clarify that, but that is my direct understanding.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Wayne.
What is planned for this substantial piece of land that abuts Albert Street? Is it just going to be landscaped as sort of parkland, or?
Mr. Chairman, to Member Bromwell, are we able to examine, or I'm able to call up the screen? Or I think Jonathan had his, because I cannot access that screen, sir. But I can.
Which
I
one
can.
are you looking for?
The concept plan, Jonathan?
Yep.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Jonathan. I assuming, Mr. Chairman, it's acceptable that we refer to the concept plan?
Yep, they're just pulling it up right now.
Thank you. So if I could ask Mr. Bromwell, Member Bromwell, what lands is he referring to specifically?
At the back of the building, there's a large triangular piece of.
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Chairman, to Member Bromwell, that will be landscaped open space.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions of the applicant, Councillor Seymour Fagan?
Thank you. And yes, thank you, Kevin, for this. And I agree, we're in desperate need for housing all across Ontario. You know, I've heard it from many people. So I'm just wondering, and it might be our new CEO. Welcome, Kristen, to the team. You've got a lot of work to do, and that's great. So thank you for coming on our team. So is it going to be like more than like, is it housing first? I'm wondering for one. And is it going to be 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom? What is going to be our target market for this project?
Perhaps I can start, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Seymour Fagan. Earlier on in the presentation, your planner outlined the apartments. There is a mix of 1, 2. There may be 3 bedrooms, but it's predominantly 1 and 2. Insofar as housing first, I can't speak to that directly. Perhaps Ms. Maxwell could on behalf of the team. So thank you. And I would agree, housing of all forms is a priority of all of our communities, period.
Through the chair to Councillor Seymour Fagan. At this point, it's a little early in terms of defining all of the tenant selection processes. So I can't say for certain how many tenants might be housing first clients or from the by name priority list at this point. That's typically closer to the time of occupancy. I will say KLH Housing Corp does try to take tenants from the by name priority list of people experiencing homelessness, though there's also, we had a meeting about it this morning, considerable care put to ensuring that there is an appropriate mix of, call it acuity level or needs of particular clients, and as well that any clients with challenges would be receiving full support. So as things progress, I can provide you with more information, and happy to discuss it.
Any further questions? Mayor Letham?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm just looking for a bit of clarification from somebody. We're hearing a lot of different information here today. The recommendation from staff is that it be referred back. So for further comments and consultation. When are we proposing, what are we still waiting for, I guess? And when are we proposing that this come back? I'm hearing comments about, financing, grant opportunities we might lose if it doesn't come back quick enough. So I'm hearing a lot of different information, and I'm just looking for some clarity from someone, on a timeline when this might come back, what we're still waiting for. Is there something that we still need, or are we just following a public meeting process, which I respect as well, before we start approving applications without hearing from anybody? So I'm just looking for a little more information, if I can, from whoever.
Through the chair to Mayor Laughlin. Yes, so yeah, I can appreciate there's definitely a lot of conversation happening on this file. So staff would be prepared upon receiving something in writing detailing the proposed reduction in parking, as Mr. Duguay outlined, something in writing for our file. We would appreciate to have that. That would close that loop on the parking reduction, as well as, I believe there was one other item. Do we just need to confirm with regards to proposed reduction in setback as well for the development? So once those two items from planning from the consultant can be addressed in writing, submitted to our office, review those, then we could expect to have it returned to the next pack. And I'm looking above me to see when that is, and it looks like August 4th. If that is potentially, we could target that depending on a turnaround time on those two outstanding items. Other than that, from agency requirements or other departments, everything appears to be acceptable.
Okay, so if I might, then just for clarification, I mean, these aren't going to get ratified by council till August 10th, regardless, whether it's this meeting or the August 4th meeting, because we're not having a July council meeting. So if we're referring it back and you get the information you're looking for, Jonathan, and we can get it back to August 4th, I think we're hitting the same timeline we're all talking about here. So I'm certainly comfortable with that. So thank you for the clarification.
And if I might, Your Worship, if August 4 and August 10 are the applicable dates, that would be acceptable and would work with our timeline. And I would work with Jonathan directly in this regard. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you can get him those comments back that he's looking for still outstanding, Kevin, then I think we can make everything work here. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Great. Any further questions? Okay, seeing none. Does anyone wish to speak to this application? Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this application?
We had no members of the public. We did have a number of consultants and other advisors on the line. If they want to speak, this is the time.
Okay. Any members of the public wishing to speak to this application? Going to call it for one more time. Anybody wishing to speak to this application? Okay. That brings us back down to, we've got a recommendation. Committee, what are your wishes? Deputy Mayor O'Reilly.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I'll give a motion that we receive the report and that we refer it back to staff until the August meeting if we get the information.
Seconder for Deputy Mayor O'Reilly, Councillor Seymour Fagan. Just clarification, Deputy Mayor O'Reilly, you're referring it back for the August 4th pack, correct?
That's correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, calling the question, all in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. That brings us down to 3.2. Just before we start, I will clarify, because I think I skipped that step earlier, that any of the reports here today, any of the recommendations are being referred or will be referred to either the August 4th PAC meeting or the August 10th council meeting. So 3.2 is Plan 2021-039, rezoning application, Three Lakes Development, Inc. Acting Director Hawley.
Yes, good afternoon, members of the Planning Committee. Can you see the shared screen?
We can.
Okay, thank you. So this application proposes to rezone the subject lands. It is looking to add a zoning provision to allow for decks to encroach approximately 1.8 meters into the rear yard, and to allow the front porches to extend into the front yard by 3 meters and allow a further incursion for steps. The reason this amendment is being sought is because the Village of Bobcaygeon bylaw doesn't have any provisions for encroachments. And so when we speak to encroachments, what we mean is there is no ability for if the rear yard setback is 7.5 meters, and that's the setback between the rear property line and the back of the house, there's no ability for a deck to encroach into that setback. Bobcaygeon it's an older zoning bylaw, so therefore it doesn't have those types of provisions. So hence we're looking to modify the zoning bylaw. This development is coming fairly close to being finalized. The first phase of it is 68 lots. And that represents the first phase out of 221 units altogether. So there are 221 single detached units, and there are another 40 townhouses. The townhouses are being developed at the far north of the property. There will also be a park block coming in a future phase as well. The developer is Three Lake Developments Inc., and they have made an application to revise all four residential exception zones that are currently in existence on the property. The proposal meets the provincial policy statement, the 2020 version. Provides for sustainable, healthy, livable communities. It also meets any servicing requirements. So for example, this application, the additional hardscaping would not impact stormwater management facilities. There is sufficient capacity to allow for these additional matters to be accommodated within the stormwater facility. The application also meets the 2020 growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe by providing a number of different housing options and developing complete communities. The application also meets the policies contained within the urban designation of the County of Victoria official plan. It also meets a number of the different goals of the city's strategic plan, provides an exceptional quality of life, and provides a variety of housing options. The application is going to be on full municipal services, so full sanitary, water, and stormwater services. So all the properties and the roads will be drained into a storm pond that is developed just west of the proposed development. The application was circulated to all landowners within 120 meters of the site, and as well all relevant agencies. At the writing of the report, we only had one phone call, and it was essentially a clarification of whether or not encroachments mean encroachments onto abutting private property. However, since then, we've received a number of written comments on the proposal. They have all been circulated and should be in your folders. I think to characterize the comments would be, I think there are some privacy concerns that have been raised by a number of the residents. That's in part because the developer, in order to service the development, has had to raise the subdivision and raise the land up in order to make the subdivision work from a servicing perspective. There are also some construction-related concerns which staff continue to deal with the developer as well. We also we did receive sign-offs from the engineering department as well as the building department on the proposed subdivision or proposed zoning bylaw amendment. However, we did last week receive comments from the Curve Lake First Nation requesting some additional background information. Obviously, when this proposal was originally considered back in 2010, 2011, consultation with First Nations was much different than it is today. Today, we have a duty to consult. Back then, they were circulated on applications and we did get comments, but the comments are much different today. So they wanted to get a bit of an understanding of the impacts of the proposed development on the environment, on water quality, on fish habitat, and essentially archaeology. Understanding whether there are any archaeological remains on the property, especially all properties within 300 meters is important to First Nations. The comments were sent to the agent, and the agent responded extremely quickly. So a letter has been sent to Curve Lake First Nation for review. They have, in my estimation, provided a lot of information to Curve Lake, and I'm trusting that will be satisfactory. The consultant was able to obtain the archaeological assessment that was done back in 2009 for the property. They also attached the environmental impact study as well. So we're going to leave a little bit of time for Curve Lake First Nation to review that. Essentially, from a planning perspective, we don't have any concerns with the proposal. There will be a small increase in coverage as well, from 45 to 50% to accommodate the front porches. However, the back decks, because they are impervious, we don't consider those to be needing of any additional coverage, as they would essentially, all the drainage would essentially run off the decks and into the ground, and then essentially infiltrate into the ground. My original recommendation was to request that this be approved, and that the attached bylaw be forwarded to council on August 10th for approval. However, given the number of public comments that we received, as well as the comments that we received from Curve Lake First Nation, I feel that it would be prudent to refer this matter to the August 4th PAC meeting. Again, there is no difference in terms of whether it gets referred directly from now and the recommendation is made, versus whether we put a small pause on it and send it to the August 4th PAC meeting, and then have it considered at the August 10th council meeting. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Richard. Does the committee have any questions of Richard at this time? Mayor Latham?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple, Richard, if I can, just for my clarification. So the front yard, minimum front yard is 6 meters, and you're proposing permitting an encroachment up to 1.5 meters of that 6 meters. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So the rear yard, is that flankage yard? Is that what they call the rear yard? Don't have my terminology.
No, the rear yard is the rear yard. A flankage yard would be a side yard that abuts a road.
So what's
So,
the rear yard? What's the rear yard coverage?
So the rear yard setback is
Setback.
7.5 meters. So they are proposing a 1.8 meter setback into the rear yard.
Into the 7 meter.
7.5, yes.
7.5 meters. So, you know, there are some privacy concerns I've heard as well as you have, and, you know, it is up high, it is a little bit higher, so certainly legitimate concerns. Is there any opportunity to push the setback in the front a little less, and then, you know what I mean, move the whole house a little less of a setback in the front encroachment to leave a little bit more room in the backyard for that encroachment, and still, you know, maybe a meter, so you're 5 yard setback in the front as opposed, and then 8.5 in the back, just to give a little bit more space for those residents who are already there? Is that something that was looked at, or is there a reason that couldn't be accommodated?
I'm certainly fine with that, bringing the front, the habitable portion of the building forward. Obviously, you don't want to bring the whole house forward because you still need the parking spaces in front of the garage. But certainly bringing the habitable space closer, I don't have a problem with bringing that closer. It certainly just brings the houses forward. Now the question is going to be whether or not that helps the developer, because they probably have some house designs that are currently fixed, and whether or not this will help them enough, or whether or not they can actually make use of that is a question for the developer, for the applicant. But I have no problem with your suggestion.
Yeah, no, I guess I'm just, you know, there's no privacy concerns in the front yard, obviously, at this point, so there's a little bit more leeway there. So maybe that's just something you could follow up on, and certainly happy with your recommendation to refer it to the August 4th meeting, and maybe we could just get an answer back on that for August 4th as we move forward. Certainly support the subdivision. I think it'll be great for Bob Cajun, but trying to respect the residents who live there currently, and give them as much, as much privacy and peace of mind as we can. So I'll leave that one with you. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Wayne, go ahead.
A couple issues that were brought up in the letters involve berming and walls and blocking the drainage for the backyards of existing residents. Have staff looked at that, or could they look at that before the August meeting?
Through the chair to Member Brumwell, those are construction details and matters that our engineering department is continually reviewing, and that really comes down to a construction issue. We are aware of a lot of those concerns, and we are looking after those.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor O'Reilly.
Thank you to you, Richard. The idea of the encroachment, I think in one sense, is a good idea. I'm not exactly sure what we settle on for the final one, because a number of new subdivisions are going in. We've had to deal with people with their decks. And it's been a process, and especially when you're familiar with Alcorn. And I think with a lot of the challenges with the new subdivisions, people have been used to nobody in their backyards, and they think they're never going to have them there forever. And I know that we have to address their concerns, and we should address their concerns. But I think the idea of lessening with the encroachment on the decks is certainly it'll solve some of the problems for a lot of new subdivisions that we're going forward with. So anyways, I'll wait till you see come back in the August and see how we deal with it. Thank you, Richard. I don't know if you have any comment or not.
Thanks.
Through the chair to Deputy Mayor O'Reilly. I think we've had a number of issues with decks, especially with encroachments into yard provisions. I think what we're going to start asking for a little bit more is to get developers to provide with their subdivision applications some housing formats, so that we can understand better. Perhaps there needs to be a bit more tailoring on the zoning end. Certainly, for example, Bob Cajun, when we looked at this proposal, we never really had a level of detail on the housing front that the current developer is proposing. So I think in the future, when we're looking at subdivisions, we're going to be asking for a little bit more detail at the front so that we can anticipate this type of issue when the subdivision is being dealt with, rather than having to come back 10 years later and having to do a site-specific zoning amendment on this for this type of thing.
Any further questions? Councillor Seymour Fagan.
Yeah, thank you for that, Richard. And I think that'll make it easier for everyone. And Andy, I appreciate maybe if they could, the builders look at moving the houses a little bit further onto the street. And I know with this area, they have had nobody behind them for a long time. And it's been, it's been a challenge with development going in behind them. And I know both the residents and the developer are trying to make this work for both parties. So I just want to say thank you, because I know, Richard, it's been a bit contentious on both ends, because it's a bigger development and it's one of the newer ones in Bobcaygeon. So thanks for all the work that you've done on this.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none. Does the applicant owner or agent on behalf of the applicant owner wish to speak to the application?
Yes, Eldon Theodore from MHBC here on behalf of Three Lakes. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. Yes, first I want to thank Mr. Hawley for the presentation on the proposal. What I want to just provide a couple of notes, and also just respond to some of the questions that have been raised by the committee. So as you know, the proposal is to amend the existing zoning really simply to allow for the patios and stair encroachment within the front yard, and as well as within the rear yard, and specifically a 1.5 meters for the porch and additional 1.5 for stairs in the front yard, and 1.8 meters for porch and stairs in the rear yard. And as mentioned, there's no provision in the zoning today that allows for encroachments. And I can tell you from experience that these type of encroachments and permissions are typical in municipalities across Ontario. So we see this as really updating the bylaw to be more in keeping with current practices, as well as more urban type of lot developments where space accommodation is not as abundant as existing historical lots. This will also enhance the usability of the front and the rear yard for residents, increasing animation and eyes on the street, in the front yards, and diversifying the outdoor experience in the rear yard. And it goes without saying, just a reminder to this committee that the subdivision is already draft approved and under construction, and approval of the zoning will not change the subdivision that has been draft approved, nor will it change the location of lots or any of the fundamentals of the infrastructure that has been approved through the process. It will simply allow for these minor encroachments to enhance the living experience of the residents. With respect to the comments, the confirmation that Mr. Hawley provided about the Curve Lake First Nation, I worked with your staff to quickly respond to the comments because in my view, I believe Curve Lake First Nation have misinterpreted the extent of what this application is doing, as it is not changing the nature of what has already been approved to date. So with respect to archaeology and with respect to environmental impact assessments, they have already been reviewed, assessed, and deemed appropriate and have allowed for draft approval. And there are already mechanisms in place in the draft approval that allow for assessment should any archaeological findings emerge as part of the development process. So I believe, and I hope through that communication, I'll be working with Mr. Hawley and the rest of your staff to reaffirm that understanding with Curve Lake First Nation, and that this application, for all intents and purposes, is really a technical adjustment of permissions that have already been established within this area. With respect to the comment about bringing the front yards closer to the street, we're happy to explore that. One of the items that we'd be sensitive to is ensuring that parking within the front yard can continue to be maintained. So that if we were to shift building footprints, if that ability did happen, that it can be accommodated, and as well from a civil perspective, that relationship of footprints and what has been done in terms of grading today can be accommodated. We've also been in discussions because we recognize there have been a number of comments and concerns as relates to overlook and loss of privacy. We're exploring opportunities to provide additional screening, whether that be additional trees planted in the rear yards of those properties that back onto the properties that front onto Curve Lake, or perhaps enhancement of the proposed chain link fencing that is currently planned along the property line to date. One or both of those we're hoping that is a part of the solution to help to mitigate that concern. And what we'd like to do, and we're supportive of your staff's recommendation to take this to the next planning development meeting, is work with your staff to see what changes can assist in terms of helping to mitigate those concerns of potential patios that may have an overlook opportunity in certain locations along that shared property line. I do know that there were other comments that were raised by residents through their submission. I want to advise this committee that I'm available to answer any of those. Should the committee wish and to come back to me following those public deputations. And I'm happy to answer any questions now, should you have any. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present.
Thank you. Committee, any questions for Mr. Theodore? Okay, seeing none.
I have a question.
You're not in the committee.
Oh, I'm not in the committee.
Okay, at this time, does anyone wish to speak to this application? Is there any member from the
Yes.
public?
Yes.
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 Okay, please turn your video on and state your name for the record, please.
Greg.
Is Greg going, or do you want me to start?
Robert, go ahead.
Okay, just with respect to what Eldon was saying there, he talked about a chain link fence. We were under the impression it was going to be a privacy fence. You have to understand that this rock wall behind our property is going to be raised about 3 feet higher than our own land. And then a fence is going to be mounted on top of that. Also, the fence and the rock wall that they plan on building is going to be sitting right directly on where the property line exists now. And that means that the drainage ditch that they created to help disperse all of the water and so forth coming up all our properties, we do not have that function now, meaning that our backyards will become flooded. Because this is not going to be draining into the, we endured all the blasting, all the construction right on that property line. I lost trees because they took the roots out, and it continues to be quite a mess. I've had rocks literally fallen onto my property that had to be removed, at which point one of the workers threatened my life because I had made a complaint about that. Well, I'm very sorry, but it should never have been done like that, whether it was temporary or not. But it surely gave me an idea as to how they plan on building this structure directly behind our property, which again is going to be sitting roughly about 3 feet higher grade. Now, mind you, if you pass this bylaw and allow them to do that, that means that they're going to be using up all that property right up until that fence line. Now, the thing is, we need that fence and everything to move back at least 2, maybe 3 feet from where the property line is, if they're going to build that so that we can have access to that drainage ditch that they built as well. Otherwise, we're not going to have any drainage from our back properties at all. As it is, our properties are always sitting lower back there than they are from the front of our property. So it's sort of divided where it's sort of shaped like that, from where the house goes to the back, and then obviously from the front of our property to Front Street.
And they won't be able to look at the back of the property. They'd have to come under our property.
So in order for, and then I'm wondering how any maintenance is going to be done on this structure that they plan on building right on the property line when they would have no access to the south side of that fence or that structure. If the rock wall decides to collapse and comes down, I mean, we're not talking like a couple of feet here, a foot and a half. You should see how high that road is from behind our house. It's like up about nine feet, maybe almost 10 feet high already. And they want to try to taper that back so they have a less slope, which is fine. I mean, it's great if they want to do that. But the problem is, as soon as you get to our property line, there is going to be a drastic drop. Now, how are we going to fix this problem? If they still want to do that, we need to have access to what that drainage ditch is there and designed for. I've talked to a number of construction engineers about this, discussed with them what they believe would happen, and they all believe that we're going to get flooded, especially in the wintertime. You know, Eldon talked about, or maybe it was Mr. Hawley talked about the runoff of decks. Well, if you live in Bobcaygeon, you know how much snow we get, and you know how much snow can accumulate on top of a deck. I have a back deck in my backyard that I get probably, if you're not shoveling it, you're getting probably close to about 6-7 feet of snow on there that accumulates just because of the way the wind can blow through there. Now, you're not building any houses at the end of that road. That's going to be just a tunnel for wind and so forth that's going to come right along from the west. All our wind and our storms come from the west. And they're going to get pelted with a lot of snow. That means a lot of moisture. That means we need really, really good drainage to take over for that purpose. Those were some of my main concerns. I guess there's a few other people here that would like to speak as well. So I'll end there for now. But I believe that we really need to take into a great deal of consideration of where that fence and how that's going to be built and structured that's going to be directly behind our properties. Because if that's going to impact us in a way where we're going to get flooding back there. I have a little cottage right on the back that's only about maybe 10 feet away from that property line. And it will be flooded this winter for sure if that thing is built and designed the way they suggest they're going to be doing it. Now, if we say, oh yeah, probably won't do that, and you just let it go and it does do it, what do I do then? You can't change something afterwards. So I think the engineering aspect of everything that's going through here needs to really be investigated. And as far as the fencing and stuff goes, I don't believe a chain link fence is going to do it. I mean, if you're thinking of bringing the houses closer to the back of our properties, you know, we need to have some kind of a privacy fence there of some sort. We've lost trees. All my trees are dying back there that I did have. I had a nice little forested area. But due to the fact that they've dug so close to the property line, a lot of the roots have all been cut and they're all starting to die. We lost a few with, believe it or not, we had a tornado go through Highway 8, I believe it was last week, wasn't it? County Road, County 8, yeah. So, you know, there's some severe weather and we're getting more and more severe weather all the time and torrential rains. And you guys have seen the rain in the last few weeks that we've gotten. And it's going to be a major issue that these things need to be rectified so that we are going to benefit from this drainage ditch that naturally drained into the forest prior to them building on it. So that's...
Okay, thanks, Robert. If you just want to hang on, I'll see if anybody has any questions. Committee, any questions of Robert? Okay, seeing none. Thanks, Robert. Those comments have all been taken into account, and we'll go from there. Is there anyone else from the public wishing to speak to this application?
Yes, I would.
Okay,
My name
Greg.
is Greg Matthew. Hi, how are you today, Chairman and all the attendees and the City Council? I have some concerns about the subdivision as well. The same as I think his name was Robert was saying. All the lots do grade towards the rear of the lots, and if they propose to put such a block wall there, it will trap a lot of the snow, a lot of the runoff. It will cause a severe amount of flooding issues in the back of all the, I think there's 12 or 15 homes that are going to be affected by this new subdivision directly. Those are all, I believe that's the adjoining lots. I believe that the elevation is close to 10 feet, and if you have a home that these lots are extremely shallow, they're only 100 feet, which is very small. And if you offset that home from the street and you put that deck on the back with that elevation, no matter what that privacy fence, I think you're still going to have privacy issues with the existing owners. I don't believe that the existing owners should be punished with their privacy because of this new development. I'm fully for the development in the sense of I agree with the fact that growth is the future, and the added taxes are a benefit. And for the schools and for the businesses and such, but I don't believe that the existing residents along Front Street West should have to take the brunt of all this new development with the loss of privacy. If you want to let such a thing happen, why does it have to happen along Front Street West? If you want to let them have amend this bylaw about with this deck encroachment in the rear and the front of the home, why don't you allow that inside their inner subdivision so it won't affect the existing residents on Front Street West? I don't believe that people move up to Bob Cajun to live on top of each other. I think everyone moves up here to enjoy the trees and the nature and the space, the lakes. Everyone's very friendly up here. There is a little bit more space, and I do believe that's why people move here. If you wanted to live in the city, you could live in the city and have these very close lots, and that will be your thing. Now, I also don't believe that this builder is looking at both sides of the street. I believe the builder is only taking in his own interest of what is going to happen for his own what he's going to obtain. He's not really looking at the existing residents saying, you know what, we're going to put the subdivision back here. You know what, we understand that you've been here for a long time and it's been quiet back here, but they have not done such a thing. The original plan was to leave the buffer. They had left an original strip of land, maybe about 3 meters or so, all the way up where this new, right on the property line where they want to put this new property line. That was told all the existing residents. Now they've come along and went right to the property, affected all these trees, and are actually affected the privacy on their own sense by doing such a thing. The other question I do want to arise about First Nations is that I don't know if the city council or Mayor Latham has seen the video of what the developer was doing during the walleye spawn on Sturgeon Lake, where they were dumping water into the lake during the spawn. They were dumping their ditch water into the opposite side of the street on Front Street West on the south side that adjoins Sturgeon Lake. It undermined a cottage. It created a massive amount of turbidity in the water, which would seriously affect the walleye spawn, which I can assume that First Nations wouldn't appreciate, considering that they do rely on food for sustenance. I believe I myself personally have been told by the developer that if I talk nicely, then I'll get a wood fence. Other than that, it's a chain link fence going behind my property. Now, my property flanks the property behind me. So if you put a chain, and the house sits 8 feet from property, 8 feet. So they came to me, told me they want to cut all my trees down. They're going to put a chain link fence there, and the house is going to be 8 feet. The whole length of my property is going to be a structure. And I even said to them, I sent them an email about, well, if you're going to cut down the trees, what is your proposed plan for reinstatement of green space and some sort of a privacy fence? Because I don't even think the new owner would appreciate that. But Three Lakes Development responded. I sent quite a lengthy email, and their sole response was, we will not cut trees on your property. This developer is looking only in the sole interest of themselves. They are saying to you and saying to the neighbors and saying whatever's the best to fit their interest. I do not believe this developer is looking at the existing. I believe the developer is just looking for themselves. I do have a concern for myself that if I ever do go to sell my home, I don't live in the city. If you cut all my trees down and put a chain link fence, you're going to devalue my home. I don't believe I just don't believe that the existing residents should be punished for their privacy by this new developer wanting to put these houses so far back and add a big deck in the back. There's already a concern about water. The more structure you put on these shallow lots,
you're just running tight on time, Greg. If you can wrap your presentation up.
Sorry, I'm done. I'm finished. Thank you.
Thanks. Committee, any questions of Greg, or Councillor Seymour Fagan?
It's not of Greg, actually. It's for Richard Hawley. Don't we deal with the landscape issues through site plan on developments?
Through the chair to Councillor Seymour Fagan. This development isn't subject to site plan control. It is a subdivision, so there is no landscaping component that we deal with through site plan control here.
Okay, any further questions of Greg at this time? Okay, seeing none. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak to this application?
We only have one other person registered. Brian?
Oh, hi. I'm just wondering for the next meeting, if there could be like a graphic of what these changes would entail, because I'm not really sure what it means. And if there was like a simple graphic of how things are now and how it would be with the change in bylaw, I'd appreciate that. And we did have a tree come down as well right after the blasting, like Rob was saying. And I did also see, I have a video of that silts going into the water in the spring, and it was doing that for a few days, I think, and we didn't notice it at first, but just wanted to mention that. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Brian from committee? Okay, seeing none. Is there any other members of the public wishing to speak to this application? Okay, we don't see or hear anybody, so
There was just, sorry, there was just Saad Tabani. If he would like to speak, that was the last person registered.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having us on board during this committee meeting. We have taken into account a lot of the concerns that have been raised by especially members of the public. With respect to privacy concerns, we are committed to providing whatever infrastructure that our teams see fit in order to maintain and continue the privacy of our neighbors and the residents of Bobcaygeon. Now that could obviously include a wooden privacy fence. It could include some tree planting in our purchasers' rear yards. And it also could include other enhancement features that our architects and our engineers would be working on. In terms of the drainage issue that was raised by Robert, I would just like to add that drainage for the pre-existing homes on Front Street was already considered when we went through our approval processes, and that the infiltration trench in the rear yards of lots 1 to 28 have already been engineered and constructed to account for drainage coming off of the existing homes on Front Street. Now, I am not an engineer, so I will take these concerns to our engineering team and be able to propose some sort of a response on these concerns. As far as I am aware, it does not really matter that there is a retaining wall in before the infiltration trench. The whole idea of the infiltration trench is that the water finds its way there because it's been filled in with clear stone, with Terrafix and some native soil backfill. And the infiltration trench leads into a perforated pipe, which is well below the elevation that the retaining wall would be on. So even though I'm lay and I don't appreciate any concerns with respect to flooding, I will take these concerns back to our engineering team and have a better answer the next time we meet.
thank you. Okay, committee. I believe the recommendation on the floor is to, or staff's recommendation is to refer the application to the August 4th PAC meeting. What's committee's wishes? Mayor Latham?
Yeah, I'll give you that, that the rezoning application, 3 Lakes Development, be received and referred back to staff to address issues and comments and return back to the August PAC meeting as a report.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for Mayor Latham's motion? Councillor Seymour Fagan. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That motion carries. Thank you. Oh,
Thank you.
okay, that brings us to 3.3, Plan 2021-040, amend the Village of Fenelon Falls official plan and zoning bylaw 89-25 at 205 Francis Street East. Mark LaHaye.
Good afternoon, members of committee. I will try and share my screen here. Everyone see that? Okay. Notice for these applications for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment were given to each assessed landowner within 120 meters and all applicable agencies and departments. A sign was also posted on the property in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act. The subject property, as you see, is located on the easterly edge of the village of Fenland Falls on the northwest corner of Concession Road and Francis Street East, which is considered a collector road. The owner has applied to amend the institutional community facility designation with a site-specific policy to also permit business and professional offices, and to amend the community facility exception 1 zone to implement the proposed site-specific policy. The effect of the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications will permit business and professional offices or other administrative offices and government offices, together with permitting a coffee shop and/or confectionery shop as an accessory use within the existing building, in addition to the existing permitted medical clinic use, subject to site-specific development standards such as recognizing the existing parking stall size. Here's an image of the existing site plan. The owner wishes to add these additional compatible general commercial uses to diversify the mix of uses which are in demand and to make the subject property more economically sustainable. No changes to the building or site are proposed. Various documents and plans were submitted by the applicant in support of the proposed amendment, including a planning justification report, as well as the existing site plan you see prepared by DM Wills Associates Limited. Since the writing of this report, staff have received no comments from the public and no further comments from circulated departments and agencies. This application or these applications are being further evaluated, more specifically with respect to the site-specific policy in relation to the Village of Fenland Falls official plan, as well as compliance with the Village of Fenland Falls zoning bylaw to recognize any required site-specific provisions, including parking stall size or parking aisle width. The background information which has been submitted in support of these applications was circulated to the appropriate agencies and city departments for review and comment. At this time, we haven't received all of the circulated agency and city department comments. In addition, or in consideration rather, of the comments and the analysis that's contained in the staff report, staff respectfully recommend that the proposed zoning bylaw amendment application and official plan amendment application be referred back to staff for further review and processing until such time as comments have been received from the public and from all circulated agencies and city departments, and that any comments and concerns have been addressed. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Committee members, any questions of Mark on the application? Mayor Latham?
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mark, you know where I'm coming from. I sent you an email earlier. Would you have any, I don't have a problem referring it back, but I know this seems like a pretty straightforward. They're not adding any building to the building, just some additional uses. Would you comfortable if we return it, make a motion to return it to the August PAC meeting as a report to give you a chance to do the bylaws, and then that'll still get to the August 10th council meeting? Would that be a good compromise that you could work with?
Yes, through the chair to Mayor Latham, that would give us the opportunity to further review the application and prepare any necessary bylaws and the structure of those bylaws for consideration at the August 4th PAC meeting, ultimately to be considered at council.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Any further questions of Mark at this time? Okay, seeing none. Does the applicant owner or agent on behalf of the applicant owner wish to speak to the application?
Yes, please. Through the chair, good afternoon, and as well to all members of the committee. My name is Amanda Doherty. I'm a planner at DM Wills Associates, and I'm here on behalf of my client, Mr. Pollock, who is the property owner. He does send his regrets. He was unable to make it today. I agree with Mr. LaHaye's explanation of the proposal. Mr. Pollock has no plans to complete any construction or any site alterations. He only wants to amend the uses which are currently permitted on the property. He's owned the property for nearly 13 years and has had issues with vacancies nearly that entire time. For example, one of the largest units actually became vacant 10 years ago and has actually remained vacant this entire time. It's never been filled. There's another unit that's been vacant for 3 years. And so he's experienced anywhere between 30 to 40% vacancy within the building over the past 10 plus years. And as Mr. Pollock just recently lost another tenant, he now is experiencing half vacancy within the building. So there's approximately 8 units and 4 of them are vacant. So certainly permitting these additional uses as requested will allow Mr. Pollock an opportunity to reestablish the property as being economically sustainable and certainly also provide additional opportunities for business professionals within Fenelon Falls. So I just want to say thank you to Mr. LaHaye for his work so far on these applications, and we're certainly happy to work with him on structuring the amendments as necessary. I'm of course happy to answer any questions if there are any, but that otherwise concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Okay, seeing none. Is there any members of the public wishing to speak to this application at this time? Any members of the public wishing to speak to this application? Any members of the public wishing to speak to this application? Okay, seeing and hearing none. Committee, what are your wishes? Mayor Letham?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll give you a motion that the report be received, that the applications respecting the proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment be referred back to staff and returned to the August PAC meeting as a report with the appropriate bylaws.
Seconder for Mayor Letham's motion. Jason? Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, that brings us down to 3.4 on our agenda, Plan 2021-041, amend the Bob Cajun zoning bylaw 16-78 at 12 Mansfield Street, Bob Cajun. Ian Walker.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully everyone can hear me fine. So this proposal is for the bruncheonette at the property at the intersection of Park Street and Mansfield Street. Sign was posted on the property and notice given in accordance with the Planning Act to all the neighboring properties within 120 meters. And so there we have just the neighborhood, quick shot of the neighborhood. Since writing the planning report, we have had a number of public comments come forward, including another 1 or 2 came in over the weekend, and in addition, received comments from the church, the neighboring church to the east, just this morning, which would be on this property here, just immediately to the right of the one highlighted in green. So with some questions and looking for further clarification on it, a couple of the neighbors in the area are objecting to the application. At least I have seen at least one letter of support. And as such, at this time, staff are respectfully recommending that we continue with the recommendation in the staff report that it be referred back to staff. That would also allow the applicant further opportunity to take all of the outstanding concerns, give them an opportunity to see if they can address all the outstanding concerns before council considering whether to pass a bylaw or to deny the application. So at this time, I'm respectfully recommending that we continue with the staff recommendation to refer it back. One of the things I will just point out here is, and this is perhaps a good segue into your earlier question, Mayor Letham, on another application. This is a corner lot, so we actually do have the front yard along Mansfield Street here and what Richard had referred to as the flankage yard along the north side, meaning that it's along the, we call it either a flankage yard or exterior side yard. The interesting thing with the Village of Bobcaygeon zoning bylaw is that it would allow accessory uses in the side yard, and it doesn't differentiate between it being a flankage or an interior side yard, which would be the other side over here. But it does not allow accessory uses in the front yard. So as it was advertised, the front yard would come across here. The proposed dining and part of the kitchen are in the front yard, as is the parking. So the other thing that by referring it back will allow us to do is to make sure that we can look at addressing any public concerns or questions. In addition, before a bylaw would go forward, we'd also be able to make sure that they have captured all of the appropriate zoning provisions that might need relief, including things like the parking that's proposed and the location of those buildings. So I'll just leave it. I do know the applicant is here to speak to the application as well. So leave it to questions, I think, following the applicant's presentation.
Thanks, Ian. Committee, any questions of Ian? Deputy Mayor O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question, Ian. Was there any theme of the people that were objecting other than the fact that they just didn't want something different going on the subject property, or could you just maybe we'll hear more from the applicant as well? But was there any kind of common theme?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. So a couple themes, I guess. One of them being potentially traffic issues. The applicant has provided a traffic letter. It's part of the file. I have also circulated that to the inquirers as well. And I've also taken each of their questions and also reached out to the applicant to give the applicant an opportunity to provide some additional feedback on specific questions. And I think one of the things I'd heard Ms. Harper mention earlier is that I think a lot of it kind of perhaps comes down to scale, perhaps, and what's anticipated for the property of this use. So then the note that I will make here is that the application refers to this as an accessory use to the principal residence. So again, keeping in mind scale, if this were to be something that is approved, goes forward and becomes very successful, and let's say over time they want to grow it larger and larger, it may move from being something accessory on the property to a principal use. And the proposal is not asking for that. The proposal is asking it to be accessory. And so again, we also have to be cognizant, I think, of scale. And so again, whether there's some relief through a bylaw that could be captured that way to, I guess, in essence, limit how large the business could potentially grow on that site. And I mean, certainly if a business were successful enough that they needed to move to another location specific for commercial use, that might be a good thing as well for the city to consider. But, you know, I think that would be succession later on. So there was parking, there was traffic, and a couple of the other concerns would be things like drainage relative to lot lines. So the church, for instance, is concerned about drainage. But my understanding from looking at some of those concerns is those drainage concerns may actually tie back more to existing roadworks, perhaps on Park Street. I think whether there's possible upgrades coming to Park Street in the future or not, I'm not sure. But some of the questions were in kind of theme to traffic and roadways. So.
Thank you.
Any further questions of Ian? Councillor Seymour Fagan.
Thank you. And through you to Ian. Would this have to go through site plan as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that is correct. It will be subject to the city site plan bylaw. So there would be a site plan application forthcoming if they're successful in getting the zoning.
So a lot of this will be dealt with, the concerns from the constituents through site plan.
Yeah, so some of the issues, certainly things like noise, waste collection, those sorts of issues could be dealt with through a site plan agreement, which would be registered on the property and carry forward with it. So some of those things can be dealt with through that matter. Not necessarily all issues can be dealt with through site plan, but certainly things like that would be. We also have to make sure that from say setbacks and any of those things are also included in the bylaw, as they would be relative then to where the activities happen on the property. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Member Brumwell?
Because of its location to the beach and the city's new parkland, would the city be obligated to put in a crosswalk? Because a lot of our little children, they don't think, they just run.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. That would not be a question that I would be able to answer, but we would look to our staff in certainly engineering and corporate assets would look at, I think, things like traffic counts through there. I don't know if it would create any obligation for the city to do that. I think we'd ultimately be looking at whether this would potentially, I guess, require some sort of a crosswalk or something through there. But these are other things that council could later on consider as well through looking at things like, council would pass bylaws and that relating to speed limits on the roadways through there. So, some other considerations could be through that perspective.
Any further questions of Ian at this time? Seeing none, does the applicant owner or the agent on behalf of the applicant owner wish to speak to the application?
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Chair. My name is Emma Drake. I'm a planner at DM Wills Associates and applicant on behalf of the property owner, Jody Harper, who is also here with us today. I would like to take this opportunity to just provide a few additional comments on this application and address some of the public comments that we have received to date. So this application is really for a smaller scale local economic development opportunity that will contribute to the dining options for residents and visitors to the Bobcaygeon area. So as everybody is aware, the population of Bobcaygeon, both permanent and seasonal, continues to grow. And as that grows, there's going to be an increased demand for services and supporting uses. And this application provides an opportunity to address that demand while ensuring that the residential character of this neighborhood is not compromised. So as Ian noted, we are proposing the Bruncheonette, which will serve breakfast, lunch, and light fare as an accessory use on this property. So that means that the residential use will remain the primary use, and the Bruncheonette will be subject to the criteria for accessory uses, including lot coverage, which would control the actual size of the buildings proposed. In terms of the actual size, the kitchen and dining facilities for the proposed Bruncheonette comprise a total of less than 60 square meters, and they will be less than 50% of the ground floor area of the existing dwelling. So that just gives you a bit of an idea in terms of scale. So this isn't a large scale restaurant per se. We're looking at a maximum of 8 tables with 2 seats each, so a maximum of 16 potential customers at one time. The style of the buildings as well, there were building elevations included in our submission, which I believe are included as an attachment to Ian's report. They're proposing a gazebo type style for the actual Bruncheonette to try and blend with the established residential character of this area. The application will provide for mixed use, gentle intensification within the Bobcaygeon settlement area, which is promoted by the provincial policy statement, the growth plan, and the official plan. And it will likewise contribute to the complete communities concept that we're familiar with. To address Member O'Reilly's comments, and Ian spoke to this as well, with respect to the public comments that have been received, these do mostly appear to relate to traffic, parking, and site design. Regarding the traffic comments that have been received, we do understand that this area receives a moderate volume of traffic already, given the presence of the Bobcaygeon Beach Park. But rather than necessarily adding to the traffic volumes of this area, it's anticipated that the Bruncheonette will draw from the existing traffic generated from the beach park and serve those who are already visiting the area. And then also being next to the residential area and in relatively close proximity to downtown, it's also hoped that customers will take the opportunity to walk or bike to access the Bruncheonette. That being the case, we have also requested some reduced parking for this facility. And as identified in your downtown parking study, there is available on-street parking, as well as some proximal municipal parking areas and parking proposed through the Beach Park redevelopment. And as was also mentioned, this property will be subject to site plan control. And so details with respect to stormwater, lot grading, those can be addressed at that time. Overall, we do believe that this application can positively contribute to the dining options for Bobcaygeon while being respectful of the established neighborhood character and surrounding neighborhood uses, and otherwise represents an innovative and efficient use of the land. I am going to turn it over to the owner, Jody Harper. And Joel, if I'm able, I'm just going to share my screen quickly here with a couple of slides. So hopefully everybody can see my screen here. And then Jody, if you want to speak to this, I will turn it over to you.
I'm good to leave it in your hands. You're you're doing a good job. I think with respect to some of the questions that were emailed, the public and the community might have a sense that this is a far bigger scale than what my intention is. I want to keep something small and intimate and quaint, and there was a question regarding takeaway and who's going to be responsible for the garbage. It's not my intention to do takeaway. I know Just for the Halibut has that already at the beach. They do a takeaway fish and chips, and this is more small scale brunch, dine-in, more for me to be part of the community. I'm semi-retired. I ran a large-scale business most of my adult career, so I'm not looking to do anything outlandish. I just want to do something small. My fiance is a really good chef, so I'd like to take advantage of the fact that we get a beautiful view of the beach park, and I think it'll tie in nicely with the regentrification that's happening over there. Yeah, and I want to. We've actually networked with quite a few of the local businesses already. So if we can use like locally sourced items, that for sure we're going to do that as much as possible. I've included a couple pictures just to kind of give a visual idea of what it is that we're intending, so that it kind of ties in with the house that's already here, and fits in with the community feel.
I think that just about covers it, Jody. If there's nothing else that you would like to provide, we are here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions of Ms. Drake or Ms. Harper? Councillor Seymour Fagan?
Just for Ms. Harper, I just want to say you're very brave wanting to do this during a pandemic, and I like your vision. This is great. You know, and I think just clarifying for the local residents that the scale. I think that that's probably anything that I've got is the scale. You know, that's always a concern when things change. Not everybody likes change, but you know, if this can move forward and people can see what you're doing, then they won't be so intimidated, probably. So, so yeah, it looks great. Thank you.
Mayor Latham?
Thank you. Not really a question, Jody. Just same comments as Councillor Seymour Fagan. I think this is an awesome idea, and I think there's just a little bit of misunderstanding of probably what you're proposing out there. The scale, as she mentioned, maybe goes back to our planner, who's our planner for large developments and is looking after this. So we need to get some clarification on that, but I know he's just filling in and helping out. But kudos to you for not being afraid to do something different. And I think this will certainly add to our classy little village of Bobcaygeon. So, you know, we just need to put some of the issues, get the information out there so everybody knows what it is we're proposing. And I think you'll, I wish you nothing but the best of luck. So thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak to this application? Anyone from the public wishing to speak to this application? There's nobody. Anyone from the public wishing to speak to this application? Okay, seeing and hearing none. Committee, what are your wishes? Deputy Mayor O'Reilly?
Maybe Kathleen wants to move it. Do you want to move it, Kathleen? Okay, I'll give you a motion that that the assumption of Riverside Heights subdivision be received and that we proceed with the rest of the recommendations.
Sorry, Pat, I think that's the wrong one.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm one ahead of myself. I'm sorry. Yeah, all right. I'm one ahead. I just go whether we receive the report and move the recommendations as printed.
Thanks. Joel won't let me do both at the same time. I tried.
Oh, I was just getting hungry watching that menu.
Is there a seconder for Deputy Mayor O'Reilly's motion? Councillor Seymour Fagan. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. So at this point, that concludes the public portion of this meeting being held under the Planning Act, so it is now adjourned. That brings us down to item 4, deputations, which there are none. Item 5, correspondence, which there are none. Item 6, regular and returned reports. 6.1 is the assumption of Riverside Heights subdivision report, phase 2. Christina Sisson.
Good afternoon, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee, for hearing this particular report today. This is a subdivision that has been going on for a number of years, as noted in the report. It culminated in a deeming bylaw, which froze some of those lots from development. And through previous assumptions, et cetera, of this subdivision, we are looking now to assume the next section of this subdivision in an effort to provide for the municipality to complete the works in this location. There was a legal action as well, and through that, we were able to confirm the amount of security available. Through the previous phases of assumption, we have also incorporated a sidewalk on the road, so that would certainly be one of the items that would also be introduced in this next phase. We have stopped the assumption short of any of the locations with new development. There have been potential inquiries with respect to some of the lands where the roads have not been built to date. And so that's separate. And that's why we're speaking specifically to Plan 626. And I'm available for any questions that you may have at this time.
Thanks, Christina. Any questions of Christina from committee? Seeing and hearing none. Would somebody like to, Councillor Seymour Fagan?
Not really a question or anything, and I would like to move this forward. Thank you, Christina. Holy moly. People will be happy. Right, Andy?
You made my day when I saw it. You made my day when I saw this one. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So that's a motion as printed then?
Yes.
Seconder for Councillor Seymour Fagan's motion, Mayor Letham. Any further discussion? All in favor, or sorry, Deputy Mayor O'Reilly, you've got a question?
I'm in favor as well, but I'm just wondering, is there any prospective buyers to date, or do we know that a prospective buyer would certainly help solve the future problems as well, too?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor, or to Deputy Mayor O'Reilly, we have had some pre-consultation type inquiries with respect to this property. I'm not sure if that's going to culminate in someone coming in to build out the remainder of Plan 627. But certainly the interest, and I'm sure Acting Director Hawley can speak to this as well, but the interest that we have received with respect to some of the lots that have been, deemed to date, this is an important aspect to be able to keep this particular project moving.
Amen.
Thanks. Any further discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? That motion carries. Thank you. 6.2, assumption of Four Winds subdivision phase 2 ops. Christina?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, we're pleased to bring this report to you in the interest of being able to provide for the public that live in this area some finality with respect to this phase of the subdivision. It is important to go through the formal assumption process in an effort to be able to then put this particular set of roads on the roads needs assessment, and then further through whichever mechanism comes next, whether it be life cycle replacement and or capital project further down the road. But it is necessary for a finality to the project. Through the phase 3 development, the neighborhood has seen some improvement in that section, and so they've certainly been looking for this to come forward. And one of the activities that will happen through this is the build out of that walkway. It is currently just grass, and certainly with phase 3 moving forward, this is going to help to get this walkway from phase 2 to phase 3 as well. So I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Any questions from committee of Christina? Deputy Mayor O'Reilly?
Thanks very much, Christina. This is another one that's been ongoing for a long time. Thank you for getting both these projects down the road into completion. I think it's great, and I think you said you only have one more left. I tried to get a hold of Juan in the meantime after I had a conversation with you. I was just wondering, would we have any idea, or would you have a ballpark idea what it might cost for a future lift, for the final lift on the 3 remaining streets? Or I don't know whether you can speculate on that or whatever, because it might be one of the bigger items left.
Thank you. Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Indeed, when we looked at the cost estimate, we're looking at probably $150,000 if we were going to look at just putting the lift on. But as I say, if it goes through the roads needs assessment, it could be determined that it would be on a life cycle replacement and go into the normal maintenance routine. The base is in good condition. The base is held well. Certainly the drainage improvements that the city undertook with the security have helped that road base to stay fairly stable to date. And the walkway itself is probably between $15,000 and $20,000 based on our current estimate.
Thank you for that, and I'm sure the residents are going to be happy to hear that as well.
Any further questions? Seeing none, you've got a recommendation in your package. What would committee like to do? Deputy Mayor O'Reilly?
I'll give you the assumption of the Four Winds subdivision phase 2 and ops to be received, and that we proceed with the following recommendations as printed.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for Deputy Mayor O'Reilly's motion? Member Brumwell, any discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? That motion carries. Thank you. And that brings us down to the end of our agenda, and we're just under the 3 o'clock mark if somebody would like to make a motion for adjournment. Anybody? Mike Barkwell. I saw Mike Barkwell's hand go up, seconded by Councillor Seymour Fagan. All in favor? Motion carries. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks.